Rambo was real. Except real-life Rambo Roy Benavidez was an even tougher son of a gun, man. This guy fought in the Vietnam War, advanced through heavy enemy fire in the jungle without protective gear, suffered 28 shrapnel wounds, was shot 7 times, once in the face, stabbed multiple times to the point where he had to hold his own intestines inside his body with his hands, while he saved 8 people from certain death before he was declared dead, but came back stronger to live and keep on fighting. So let's tell his story. Roy Benavidez was born on August 5, 1935 in Cuero, Texas. His parents were Mexican and Yaqui Indian, and they weren't exactly living the American dream. They were breaking their backs for pennies, working on plantations, living well below the poverty threshold. But what the family didn't have in money, they made up for in love and life. Oh no, wait, nah. Both of Roy's parents were dead by the time he was 7. Damn, buzzkill. Happy was supposed to be in the scene. My dog, I'll show a picture of him. He was supposed to be on my arm to lift the mood in this very moment, but he didn't want to be in this video. Now an orphan, Roy went on to live with his extended family, which didn't exactly make life any better. I mean, it wasn't quite Harry Potter sleeping in a closet under the stairs. It was Roy Benavidez sleeping in a room with 7 other people at night and working the fields to not starve during the day. And don't forget that we're talking about an 8-year-old boy here. Others go to school at that age. Roy was picking sugar beets and cotton until his bare feet were bleeding. But he worked his way up to construction sites, and by the time he was 17, he figured he'd been fighting from day one anyway, might as well do it for his country. And so he joined the military, whereby in 1965 he had earned his Green Beret as part of the 5th Special Forces Group. And all of this, his early experiences with death, the physical labor he endured on the cotton fields, topped off with the absolute elite army training he received, all of this, man, it had turned Roy Benavidez into the dream soldier for the nightmare war that was Vietnam, where he actually stepped on a landmine on his first tour and got blown up. Yeah, but don't worry, he didn't die, he just suffered spinal cord damage.
I broke my back.
What do you mean by that?
My back is broken, spinal.
The doctors told Roy that he was paralyzed from the waist down and would never walk again. But 6 months later, Roy was like... Against medical orders, Roy had secretly rehabbed himself at night. He pulled himself out of the bed against all medical advice, under tears, under excruciating pain, to redevelop his legs, to learn to walk again. And when the army doctors came to discharge him months later, they didn't know he'd been doing this. They didn't know he could walk. So Roy famously just stood up, shocked everybody, and said,
"They're gonna need to send in the National Guard or fucking SWAT team, cause I ain't going nowhere!"
By 1966, Roy was back in military shape again, and you have to understand that this is anime levels of determination, squared. Roy was an absolute medical miracle that now returned to the Vietnam War and blessed the 5th Special Forces Group with his presence. On May 2nd, these special forces found themselves in the dense jungles west of Loc Ninh, Vietnam. Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez was recovering from a previous mission injury, so while he was resting back at base camp, he did a DNA test to check his ancient warrior DNA with MyHeritage, which is funny because they also sponsored this video. Maybe you remember, I did a DNA test in one of my videos that revealed that even though my mom is German and my dad is from Cameroon, I'm also 33% Nigerian. Now, MyHeritage upgraded their system to DNA 2.5, which makes the results more accurate, meaning I now know that I'm actually only 2.6% Nigerian.
Oh my god.
Now, the biggest surprise is that my German side of the family seems to have some serious ties to, Portugal. Another new feature is ancient origins. You can trace your DNA back to the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Middle Age, which for me is consistently sub-Saharan African, with a good measure of Celtic and Germanic. It's actually very cool to see how varied my ancestry is. I think if more people learned about their ethnic makeup, we can beat back racism. Generally, I think that celebrate our similarities more so than wage war over our differences. This here just proves that we're all really a product of all history and humanity. Like, look at this family tree, maxed out at 999 people from all over the world that all share some blood with me because
family, family,
family.
And if you want to know your ancestry, then click below, use code BRIEF29 or scan my QR to get the DNA kit for only $29, which is the lowest price ever. And there's no other DNA kit of that quality out there for that price. So, May 2nd, 1968, Roy is at base camp recovering from injuries sustained in a previous mission while 12 of his men had formed a recon team to go into the jungles west of Loc Ninh, Vietnam. But soon, these 12 men found themselves surrounded by the North Vietnamese troops in unfamiliar territory. They were cut off, found themselves in a kill zone, the enemy opened fire, and all they could do was pray into the radio, hoping for a miracle to answer. Roy answered. A response team also answered and was scrambled, but Roy couldn't wait for them to get ready, not when his brothers in arms were dying by the minute. This wasn't the time for official orders. There wasn't even time to grab a rifle, body armor, a helmet.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So, equipped with only a Bowie knife, a medical aid bag, and a bottle of Tabasco, yeah, actually that's true, Roy jumped into the nearest helicopter and told the pilot to take off. When they arrived above the combat zone, gunfire erupted from the jungle below. The landing zone was not clear, so Roy's pilot couldn't find a way to put the helicopter down to get Roy into the action, and besides, was a man equipped with a knife and a first aid kit with no armor realistically gonna do in an active firefight. But then, luckily, the second rescue helicopter came in clutch, equipped with 3 special forces soldiers carrying rifles and armor ready to save the day, and that rescue chopper got shot down by the Vietnamese forces. Now, Roy and his knife was all the American soldiers had left to save them from certain death, and Roy knew it. So since the helicopter couldn't safely touch down, Roy jumped out while it was hovering at 10 feet straight down into the kill zone below, gripped his knife, crossed 75 meters of open ground under heavy enemy fire, got hit with an AK-47 slug in his right leg, but he didn't go down, kept running until a hand grenade exploded in his face, knocked him down, and covered his skull in shrapnels. Others might stop here. Roy got serious. He got back up and made it to the pinned down team, reorganized the survivors into a defensive perimeter, focused their fire, and directed an extraction aircraft. Then he administered medical aid to the wounded and dragged 6 of them back to the helicopters, constantly dodging bullets and enemy soldiers rushing him with bayonets, but whenever he could dodge while carrying a wounded man, because the truth is that Roy got hit with more bullet wounds, stabbed by several bayonets, but I'll detail a list of his exact wounds later. For now, you have to know that despite being shot, despite being stabbed, he successfully dragged 6 soldiers to safety one by one, running back into the kill zone to put his life on the line for his men every single time. And when he was finally done and had his men safely in the chopper ready for takeoff, he was told that the dead team leader carried important classified documents that needed to be retrieved. So what did Roy do? He ran back into the kill zone to get them.
Because that's what heroes do.
On the way, he acquired an AK-47 off the battlefield to engage the enemy with fire, but he still got hit with a bullet to the stomach before a grenade went off behind him that shattered Roy's back. But no time for game over, because while Roy was clinging on to that last health point, the pilot of the hovering rescue helicopter waiting for him did not. He got shot and the helicopter crashed. So now that he had retrieved the documents, Roy Benavidez dragged his wounded body back to the crash site to reform a defensive perimeter, calling in bombing runs by jets and helicopter gunships. If you didn't get the picture yet, this rescue mission had turned into an insane large-scale battle in the jungle. As he was calling in airstrikes and returning fire, Roy was shot in the thigh, while blood was gushing out of the holes in his face from the grenade shrapnels. But Roy kept his composure enough to adjust the airstrike targets based on auditory cues. In a full-scale battle with bullets going off everywhere and jets throwing bombs, he adjusted based on auditory cues. Let that sink in for a second. Finally, a new rescue helicopter was able to land, so Roy, standing on legs with 2 bullet holes in them, supporting a torn-up back, somehow swung another fellow wounded soldier over his shoulder and carried him to the helicopter past the dead enemy soldiers that they had taken down. Or so he thought, because a supposedly fallen North Vietnamese soldier got back up like the Undertaker and stabbed Roy with his bayonet. Roy's side was slashed open and his intestines were starting to spill out, but he still managed to grab the enemy's bayonet, pulled him closer with it, and introduced his throat to the Bowie knife that Roy was carrying. Then Roy held his own intestines back in with one hand. Using one hand to hold back your own intestines, it only means you have another to return fire, right? So he used that other hand to shoot back, and he took down 2 more enemy soldiers that were rushing the extraction point to take down another rescue pilot. Then Roy grabbed his wounded man again and dragged him back to the helicopter. Damn. Overall, Roy's rescue mission lasted 6 hours, and now in the chopper, his hand was the only thing holding his intestines in his body, but Roy still used his free hand to give a thumbs up to the 8 soldiers that were alive thanks to his bravery. Okay, maybe the thumbs up is an exaggeration, but I want you to think about that, because after everything I said, the thumbs up is a possible exaggeration, because he didn't give the survivors a lame thumbs up. Are you kidding me? This is Roy Benavidez we're talking about here. Put some respect on his name now, man. He used the hand he wasn't holding his intestines back with to do the handshake he had with each soldier. Finally, Roy collapsed in the helicopter, and his total injury count was 37 puncture wounds, 7 major gunshot wounds, 28 shrapnel holes, many of them in his face, a broken jaw, exposed intestines, bayonet stab wounds, an AK-47 bullet exiting near his heart, and a collapsed lung. Few people looked as dead as Roy Benavidez did, and so the medics on the helicopter understandably declared Roy dead and held a moment of silence for the hero that gave his life to save others and zipped him up in a body bag. And I like to think that if he could, Roy would have said, "Psych!" Because he wasn't dead. Man, the guy popped back out of that body bag like Kool-Aid and spat blood to prove that he was still alive. Roy Benavidez could simply not be denied. But after the extensive life-saving surgeries that followed at various hospitals over the course of the next year, doctors unfortunately did have to tell him, and definitively this time, that Roy will never walk again. Once again, Roy Benavidez defied medicine and was walking 10 months later, and another 4 months later, in 1969, he returned home, where after saving the life of 8 men in the war, he was awarded the Medal of Honor on February 24th, 1981 by President Reagan, who, during this ceremony, said, "If the story of this man were a movie script, you would not believe it." After the war, Roy became a motivational speaker. I mean, out of all the people telling you to never give up and never back down, bro, if Roy Benavidez tells me to run through a brick wall, my only question is, how fast, sir? Dude was probably the most qualified motivational speaker in the history of motivation. And another thing he was extremely qualified for was advocating for veterans' rights. Because while this man was out at war giving everything for his country, back home, his country was trying to give everything to the rich and cut veterans' benefits. So in the 80s, Roy studied to earn a college degree and became an advocate for the well-deserved benefits of himself and his fellow veterans. He gave speeches, wrote letters, and when a senator told him that these cuts would save the country a few $1 million, Roy told him, "Then you'd better come down here and take off my Medal of Honor, because I'm not saving the country a dime." And so the cuts were overturned. Roy Benavidez had saved his fellow soldiers again. This man, I mean, he came from nothing, but left this world a hero. On November 29th, 1998, at age 63, when Roy Benavidez died of complications with diabetes. After Roy had moved on, his body was buried at a cemetery in San Antonio, Texas, not far from the cotton fields he had once worked as a barefoot orphan. And his funeral was attended by many of Americans' forgotten war heroes, some of whose lives Roy Benavidez had saved. And who knows, maybe you're related to Benavidez or any of the historical figures I do videos on, so make sure you check your DNA with my heritage and use code BRIEF29 to get your entire family tree and ancestry for just $29.